Yo bar, what's up and what's happening? And welcome back to It's the Yo Bar series with me, Chris Harding. In today's video, I'd like to share a little bit of a story with you in an experience that I had with a client and how that experience actually changed the way in which I coach and how I teach nutrition. So about 2 years ago, I met a guy who came to me with quite severe high blood pressure, and he also had quite high cholesterol as well. But the blood pressure was actually the main problem. This gentleman, who was called Mark, was quite a successful builder and contractor, and he'd sold his business and he'd done very well for himself. As he'd had quite a poor diet and he drank quite a lot and lived quite a lavish lifestyle, unfortunately gained quite high blood pressure through that, and he was told that he was going to have to go on to medication to be able to control the blood pressure. So what he did is he found me and he came to me and he said, look, Chris, I want you to sort out my nutrition. I don't want to be this size. I don't want to have any health risks. I've worked very hard all my life and I want to be able to enjoy the time with my family and just enjoy life in general, which is obviously what I'm here for as a nutrition coach. Now, in my day-to-day job, as I mentioned before, I'm a nutrition coach, but I specialize in people who have got type 2 diabetes, but I also help those who've got high blood pressure and also high cholesterol. And I do also help people who want to lose weight in general, but most of the time I specialize in those metabolic diseases. So as I do with all my clients, I sit down and I interview them. I go through their life and their routine, what they like to do, what they don't like to do, and then we also discuss what they eat. And so when I asked Mark the question, what do you eat? He came back to me with a very blunt and simple answer. He said, Chris, all I do is I just eat fruit. Fruit. Yeah. All I do is I just eat fruit. Okay, so what made you want to decide to just eat fruit? He said, well, in my mind, I thought by just eating fruit, I'd probably lose weight. But actually what's happened is the exact opposite. I have actually put on more weight since I was diagnosed with high blood pressure and high cholesterol. And this is why I've come here to see you so that you can help me. So we finish off the rest of the interview and we talk about exercise and things that we're going to do in his program. But it's bugging me as to why he's put on so much weight by just consuming fruit. Obviously, fruit and fruit juices, which he was also consuming, are the reason why he's put the weight on. But actually, what is making him put on so much weight? And this is the thing that absolutely dumbstruck me. After Mark dropped a bomb on me and told me that his diet was made just from fruit, and I didn't really know quite how to answer it, I had to go away and do some research. And in my research, what I found is that fructose is actually a little bit of a culprit. Fructose can be found in things such as diet drinks, snacks. It's used to sweeten things, obviously. It's also found in table sugar, and it's also found in, you guessed it, fruit, and also fruit drinks as well as smoothies. Having a piece of fruit on its own is not going to affect your weight whatsoever. There isn't enough fructose. But if you had a diet which was based only on eating and consuming fruit and fruit juices, then here lies the problem. But the problem is actually fructose. Now, there are other different types of sugars that we consume within our diet. For example, we have dextrose and we can have lactose. And when we consume a carbohydrate, our body converts that carbohydrate into glucose. Your body converts all carbohydrate into glucose. And once your body has converted it into glucose, the glucose gets stored inside a muscle cell and is used again when the body needs to burn energy. And that is from things such as movement, exercise, and also your brain uses quite a lot of glucose when you're thinking. Herein lies the problem. The problem is that, okay, you're consuming fructose, which is just another form of carbohydrate, but the problem is that the body can't digest fructose, or if it can digest it, it can't digest it very well. I believe the reason is because the body doesn't have the correct enzyme to be able to break down the fructose properly and convert it into glucose. Therefore, what it does instead is it gets sent to the liver, and by a function of the liver, it turns the fructose into a form of fat. And that fat is stored as two different types. The first type is subcutaneous fat. Now, subcutaneous fat is the fat that you see around people's abdomens, thighs, and hips and things of that nature. Basically, the fat that we don't like to look at when we're looking at ourselves in the mirror. But the second type of fat is called visceral fat. It's the type of fat that I like to call organ fat because it's fat that's found around the organs. And this is something that can become a problem and definitely correlates towards us having more metabolic diseases. What are metabolic diseases? Well, metabolic diseases are things such as dementia, cancer, strokes, heart attacks, and also type 2 diabetes. When your body is producing too much fat caused from fructose consumption, then we can start to see where the problem comes from. I've never worked with anyone who consumes only fruit, and quite often you find that people, when they're given the news that they've got high blood pressure, or they've got high cholesterol, they've got type 2 diabetes, and they need to go on to medication to be able to control that metabolic disease, they often do things which are a little bit out of character, a little bit out of nature. They try to rectify the mistake that they've made immediately, and it often backfires, such as what Mark did with having a fruit diet. But when we're looking at overall consumption of food and we look at sugar, we're not going to say, or I'm not going to say, that sugar is necessarily the enemy. But when you're looking at high quantities of sugar, such as soft drinks, snacks, anything that's basically diet-based or fat-free tends to have a lot more sugar in it. What that means is, for you, is that a portion of your diet could actually be made up of fructose-based sugar or fructose-based carbohydrate, and you're losing out because your liver is converting that sugar into fat and it's not using it as energy. As a nutrition coach, I've been teaching nutrition for roughly about 8 years. And this story that I'm sharing with you about Mark happened roughly about 2 years ago. And I was completely unaware that fructose had such a negative effect on the diet. I'm not telling you to stop eating fruit, and I'm certainly not telling you to avoid all sugar. But what I am trying to tell you to do, learning from Mark's mistake, is to be aware of the quantity and the portion size of the sugar and fructose that you're consuming within your diet. And to help you along with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to the whiteboard. So guys, here I am at the whiteboard, and I'd just like to apologize for my slightly childish and rudimentary drawings. This is supposed to be a banana, this is supposed to be a bowl of rice, and this cube over here is supposed to be a cube of sugar. So let's break down carbohydrate for you real quick. First of all, you've got natural forms of carbohydrate, such as something like fruit, vegetables. And in this instance here, I've used an example of a banana. And the reason I've done that is because banana has also got fructose in it, which is what we were talking about earlier on. When you move over here, you've got a processed carbohydrate such as rice. Now, rice is processed because it's been through a manufacturing stage. That's how it gets to us. Over here, you've got highly processed carbohydrate. Now, highly processed carbohydrate, such as something like sugar, tends to have high amounts of fructose in it because it's been highly processed and it has got fructose in it. Now, what does that mean? Well, when you look at something which has got low amounts of fructose in it, the body can manage with lower amounts of fructose. Even though we don't store fructose very well, we tend to store it as fat, especially visceral fat and subcutaneous fat. We can get by with having low amounts of fructose. When we have something such as a processed carbohydrate like rice, rice is the type of carbohydrate that can be converted into the body's sugar. The body's sugar is known as glucose. Now, when your body breaks down something such as rice, what it will do is it will convert it into glucose, and glucose will get stored inside the muscle cell or inside the muscle tissue. And when we move or exercise, or when we use our brains and we're thinking away, our body prefers to use glucose because it's its primary source of energy. And when we move over here to highly processed carbohydrate, what you're looking at with highly processed carbohydrate is more amounts of sugar, more amounts of fructose, and a much higher rate of conversion to visceral fat and also subcutaneous fat. If we think about it, subcutaneous fat is the fat that's stored around the abdomen, around the thighs and the hips. And basically, it's the fat that we see when we look at ourselves in the mirror, the fat that we don't like. But metabolically, subcutaneous fat isn't actually that harmful to the body, and it actually doesn't cause any effect. What does cause effect is visceral fat or organ fat. Now, organ fat does have metabolic effects. Now, what are metabolic effects or metabolic diseases? Metabolic diseases are basically anything such as diabetes, strokes and heart attacks, high amounts of blood pressure, high cholesterol, things such as dementia, and also it's been related to a lot of cancers as well. So what we've got to make sure of is that we are trying to consume more natural forms of natural carbohydrates, and also some forms of carbohydrates such as rice and pasta and also bread. But what we must make sure is that we're not over consuming these, because they have been through a process and we're spiking our carbohydrate intake a little bit too high if we rely solely on processed carbohydrates. When you look over to the far right hand side of the board, what you're looking at is highly processed carbohydrates such as sugar, and that's something that you should be lowering in your diet. Now, do I think that sugar is the overall enemy to this? No, not at all. I think that having amounts of sugar in your diet is absolutely fine. But what I would say is that when you're consuming highly processed foods or foods that have been marketed and advertised to you, they're a lot more likely to have higher amounts of sugar. They are also much more likely to have higher amounts of saturated fat and also processed oils, such as things like rapeseed and vegetable oil. So my advice to you would be is to consume more natural forms of carbohydrate, some forms of processed carbohydrate, and also, yeah, you can keep in some highly processed carbohydrate, which is sugar, but you must make sure that you read the label as to where your sugar is coming from and how much sugar you're getting inside your diet. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope you're enjoying the content that I am releasing. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and also if you've got a comment or a question, please leave it in the comment box below and I will get back to you. I hope that you can use the information discussed in this video to help you on your diet journey. Be fit, be healthy, and of course, be a boss bar.
It's the Yoba series.